Hey everybody, it's Abishur Prakash, aka Mr. Geopolitics. Yesterday has given the US and the world a moment of pause after Charlie Kirk's assassination. This was an event that was so unlikely, that was so out of the blue, and it's jolted a lot of people, myself included. Now, there is a lot here than a single man being killed for no reason. Even though that is where the spotlight is right now, there are other levels, other serious challenges that need to be addressed. To me, this is as significant as what took place in Butler last year when there was an attempted assassination on then former President Donald Trump. That what took place yesterday in Utah is as significant as what took place last year. Last year was about anger at one man, anger at an individual that has had a polarizing effect on US society. Yesterday was about anger at a particular movement, a particular set of beliefs, a particular set of ideas, and the spread of this counter woke ideology, the right, the pendulum of politics swinging back to the right and disrupting a lot of people in ways that they don't like. And this is fundamentally different. In fact, what took place yesterday is perhaps far more consequential for US society and the world than what took place in Butler last year. And without sounding sensational, the question has to be asked, which is America in the opening rounds of a quiet civil war? There are those on the right that may feel that first the attack on Trump and now the assassination of Kirk crosses a line. And those individuals may take it upon themselves to retaliate, to take retribution against figures who they believe are responsible, against groups that they believe are responsible. Now, if that is what is on the horizon, where different sects of American politics, of American society, are attacking one another, this is far from the point of a official, real, chaotic civil war. But this is a quiet civil war between warring groups, warring factions that will increasingly and could increasingly become louder. Is that where the United States has reached? And that is not a question that is asked lightly. That's not a question that is asked at any moment when there's violence in a nation. It's a question that's asked after years of event after event after event, escalation after escalation after escalation, reaching a point where a vicious cycle appears to be forming. And this is a cycle of punisher, punishment, of attack, retaliation, of left versus right, right versus left. And at some point, it will reach a level where the US and the world cannot ignore. In many ways, what took place yesterday with Charlie Kirk is that first alarm bell. And for the US, this is a sign that America may only be America in name, in terms of all states being part of a single entity, the United States of America. Now, what do I mean by that? Which is that we've seen over the past 5-10 years that the movement of people in America is increasingly being defined by politics. This isn't new. A lot of people have left places like New York or California, and they've gone to parts of America like Texas or Florida because those states align with their political beliefs. And in reverse, a lot of people have left states like Texas, like Florida, and have moved to more left-leaning parts of the US. But now what is forming is far more significant. This is not about the movement of people anymore. This is about the movement of ideas. This is about how ideas in the US can move from one part of the country to another. And what is forming is almost a vertical America, an America where there are serious, permanent internal walls and barriers to where certain beliefs can go and that restrict other political beliefs and ideologies. And this means that certain people, certain ideas could increasingly be walled off from different parts of the United States. This is very different than somebody who likes the right to bear arms leaving New York State and moving to Texas. This is about somebody with a particular political outlook, whether on the left or on the right, or even just in the center which is increasingly disappearing, that somebody on the left or on the right not being able to live or function in a particular part of the US without worrying for their safety, without worrying for their job security, without worrying about the state's own laws and outlook and doctrine. This is very different and this is very dangerous. But once again, Kirk's assassination points at this being on the horizon. It doesn't mean that this has arrived. It doesn't mean that this is here. This is not the reality on the ground yet. But if a dangerous feedback loop does form, where the right and left are going after one another in a quiet civil war, then this is what is on the horizon, because states and different regions that are entrenched in particular ideologies, political ideologies, will reinforce, double down, and seek to protect a way of life that is fundamentally different than other states that are trying to reinforce, protect, entrench themselves in a different way of life. And this is a different map of America. And if the political violence increases, if people are being attacked, activists are being attacked, political figures are being attacked, influencers are being attacked, media personalities are being attacked, if that is what is on the horizon, if that is what is on the table now, then it sets the conditions for the US government to step in. We've already seen the federalization of DC to stop violence. This is now moving towards the National Guard being deployed to other parts of the US like Chicago, potentially even New York City. Now this could increase exponentially as the US government tries to stop this vicious circle from beginning, tries to stop it right before it starts. But this is so far all of the internal. This is the cascading effect, the shockwaves of the assassination of Charlie Kirk on the internal fabric of America. But I am the geopolitics guy, and when I looked at and heard and watched what took place yesterday, it immediately crossed my mind that there are serious global implications too. Number one is that the US is trying to attract serious amounts of foreign investment into the United States, particularly to rebuild the economy and compete with China. Now, foreign investors over the past 10 years, specifically since Donald Trump became US president in 2016, was elected US president in 2016, a lot of foreign investors have acclimated themselves to his unpredictable policy style. A tariff on an ally one day, a reach out to an adversary the next day, a different tariff, the removal of tariff, bit of a back and forth. But one thing investors can never acclimate themselves to is social chaos. Social chaos, be it social unrest, be it political coups, be it violent protests, are exactly what causes investors to run and flee and pause or sell. And if that is what is on the horizon for the US, or if there is a large foreign investor that views what has taken place and decides to pause activity in the US market, it will start a domino effect. Many others from around the world will also pause investment in the US. So America, which is seeking capital from around the world to rebuild its economy to compete with its chief rival, China, will face serious challenge and obstacle if this social violence, if this quiet civil war begins, and it doesn't have to materialize into even a quiet civil war. If more of these targeted hits take place, then eventually a foreign investor, a major foreign investor, will pause movement, activity, investment in the United States, and that will start a domino effect with others. Second is that fears of foreign interference are going to rise to extreme highs. If the political class, if the social class are being targeted by the left and right, then naturally governments are going to fret that foreign actors are also involving themselves or could involve themselves in social affairs, that they could attempt to escalate the violence, make it worse, sow the seeds of internal chaos. Now, if that is what happens, if governments feel that foreign actors are at play, then it makes the social violence a driver of geopolitics, whereby governments will pin the blame on what's spiraling within their societies on somebody else. And this could inflame tensions between countries. So suddenly, retribution between the right and left, retaliation between the right and left, could end up causing certain nations to sanction other countries, to warn other nations, to cut trade deals with other countries, to limit foreign investment in other nations. A range of options are on the table as nations realize or feel or believe that foreign interference is a culprit and a catalyst for the social violence in their nation. In this case, it has to do with the United States, but it's not limited to the United States. And that leads to the third point, which is that many nations around the world are polarized politically, particularly in the West. Many countries in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, are watching different political tides rise, and they are observing the outcome of this polarization in the US. They're watching what happens when this polarization reaches an extreme high. And this means that many governments could take unbelievable action towards their own societies to limit violence from flaring. This isn't just about deploying troops. This is about a redesign of how government functions in society. And the justification could be spiraling violence, spiraling social chaos, and the idea of the internal unity, the internal integration of the country, which is at the basis of national competitiveness, which is at the basis of the West being able to rise up and deal with global challenges, that this is now fragmenting and fracturing. And serious policies and change of position need to be enacted to stop this from happening. So many countries in the midst of their own political transformation, either left-driven or right-driven, are watching and have observed and are now acutely aware that what has taken place with Charlie Kirk in the US has a high probability of taking place within their own societies towards their own influencers and political leaders and officials. And this needs to be stamped out before it takes place. And how they do that could make their countries function very differently. And lastly is that the US is viewed in the world as the land of freedom, as the land where free ideas and ideas in general can be expressed without fear of punishment, without fear of violence, without fear of imprisonment. Yet, as is the case with what took place yesterday, this may no longer ring true in the perception that other capitals have. Other governments, other societies may increasingly view the US as a country where certain ideas can't be expressed freely, where certain beliefs are very limited and restricted to particular corners of the country, not because only those corners believe in those beliefs, but because only those corners provide the safety to believe in those beliefs. If this is the new optics of America, then it creates a real challenge in how America projects itself in the world, and perhaps more importantly in today's geopolitical climate, how America differentiates itself in the world, especially if the US government is intervening in ways that perhaps reflect the intervention of governments in other countries that the US is rallying against. So yesterday, what took place is a moment for reflection in America and in the world. For me personally, watching what happened hit differently because Charlie Kirk was my generation. And when you see somebody of your generation reach a certain level of success or commit a crime, or when you see somebody of your generation being diagnosed with a disease or dying, it affects you very differently than somebody that's 20 years older or 20 years younger. For the US, there has been great concern that America is at a critical juncture. America is at a critical crossroads. So far, nobody has known where America will turn, which direction America will move in. What happened yesterday could be the first sign of which trajectory America is now on, and it begets everybody in the US, particularly the government and the US society that's incredibly jolted, to maintain a certain level of unity and integration. Because once that door is open of a quiet civil war, there is no going back. And for the US holistically, big question is in front of Washington, which is that if America is dealing with unprecedented levels of social chaos and social turmoil, how does America plan to deal with its adversaries who are dealing with none of those same issues? I hope you resonated with this video. Leave your comments below and talk soon.